Slow Food, if you're not familiar, is an international grassroots movement started about 30 years ago in Italy. We support and promote good, clean, and fair food for all, and all the many dimensions and layers and communities that that covers. Slow Food Live is our response essentially to stay-at-home orders and understanding that we are all, many of us, not all of us, many of us unexpectedly at home, and we wanted to find a way to bring slow food into your home and to offer you a way to engage in all things slow food. So we've got together with Roost Books, the publisher of beautiful books, to bring on a series of authors this month. And today we are so lucky and so grateful to have Sonoko Sakai lead us through making Japanese curry bricks. Sonoko is a chef and author, among many other things. Her beautiful book, Japanese Home Cooking, which is right here and also on her counter, was published last year. It's gorgeous, wonderful stories and really awesome look at how to make some of these dishes, pantry items, all sorts of things in there. So I will let Sonoko tell you more about herself. First, I just want to say thank you so much for being with us this morning. This is such a treat and we're lucky to have you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining Slow Food webinar. This is my first Zoom webinar, so if I look a little bit nervous, maybe that's why, but it's such a pleasure to bring slow food to you. This is actually, this curry in Japan is considered like the fastest, most convenient food, but I turned it into a very slow food, but yet convenient and quick if you have these curry bricks made ahead of time. So I just want to show it to you just so that you get a quick look of what we're going to be making today. And since we only have an hour or a little less than an hour, I'm going to skip some steps like they do it in real cooking shows on TV. I learned a few tricks. But anyway, this curry and the curry bricks are featured in my new cookbook that Giselle just introduced. It's from Roost Books. And people know me for teaching noodles from scratch, miso from scratch. I do a lot of things from scratch, but I came across curry and I said, oh my God, I've been using curry bricks, industrial curry bricks all my life, feeding my family with it. But when you look at the package, the back of the package is just full of foods that are basically chemically processed foods and not natural. And I just questioned it and I said, why are we relying on industrial bricks when there must be a way that we could make it ourselves? So I spent about a year basically deconstructing these industrial curry bricks, and I took some Indian cooking classes, went to India to study spices and cooking, and came back, and now I have these curry bricks that you could just drop into the broth and make curry. And before we get started, I'm just going to put this book aside. Just going to show you what's cooking. I just started this about a half an hour ago, and this is already made. I don't know if you could see it, but this is my curry. And I would say on the average, Japanese people eat curry with rice. It's called kare raisu once a week. And you could do almost any vegetables you want. The classic is potato, onions, carrots. I like to put peppers in it. There's also celery in here, but whatever you could find in your fridge. Squash works really well. And all kinds of root vegetables. I even put kale in it, but I'm gonna put this aside and then start from scratch. So to make a curry brick, we're gonna be using spices, whole spices and some powdered spices. And just at a glance, you might think, oh my God, there's just so many spices here, 12 spices. I think some of them, or actually many of them, are already familiar to you. Let me just go through these. Black pepper, mustard seeds, black mustard seeds. This is cumin. We use it a lot in Mexican food. Coriander seeds. Then there's the powders. Some things you can only get in powder form, like turmeric powder. I get mine from a company called Diaspora if you haven't seen there, I have a bottle to show you because it's my favorite. Sana, if you're there. This is cayenne pepper. That's what gives it the heat. And here's ginger. So these are the really familiar curry spices, but there's also these spices that will give you a little bit more warmth, heat, spice, and unusual flavors. And maybe they're not as familiar to you, like fenugreek. This has a kind of a maple syrupy kind of smell, but if you can't find it, it's optional. Fennel. This is probably very familiar. You've used it in Italian cooking in your biscottis. This is very nice. This adds a kind of a lemony minty flavor, but if you don't have it, that's okay. Cardamom. I actually consider this essential in my curry, so I'm going to put it here. There's cloves. This is another a warming flavor. It's you use it. I usually use it to decorate my oranges during Halloween, and occasionally in my baking. But now I use it in my curry. And oh, you only need a few of these. And then there is a cinnamon stick. You don't need a lot of it, but again, this is a warming. It smells really nice. We just use a little bit. We're going to break it. And then there's bay leaf. And we're just going to break this up. I guess almost everybody has bay leaf if you're a cook. And then cayenne pepper. So this is what gives it the heat. And this is where you really have to adjust it, because if you are a person who can't take the heat, don't use too much of it. But I was talking to so there's so many spices, but when I was speaking to an Indian chef, she was telling me that the way someone really knows how to make a good Indian curry, or they don't call it curry, but they have regional names. They say that you blend spices and you don't want any one spice to stick out. It has to harmonize, except the cayenne pepper. The cayenne pepper is what gives it the heat. So even though I have about 12 spices here, if you miss a few that's on the list of my recipe, don't worry about it. And salt, of course, goes into it for as a seasoning. Salt can also be added during the cooking. I am making a mild curry because Japanese curries tend to be a lot milder than some of the Indian curries. And so I've noticed that a lot of my American students love heat. Like they want to just put the bottle of sriracha in there. So I say, well, put cayenne pepper, or you could also use whole peppers. See, I always keep a bottle, a jar of these whole peppers. So you could even add these at the end while you're cooking your curry if you think it needs more heat. So that's something I do. So what we're going to do is we're going to toast the ones that are whole. So I'm going to put that on this side. We're going to toast and grind. And this is a very hard cinnamon. So, see, I have this beautiful, you see this? I brought this back from India. It's such a beautiful, break the, so what you want is about maybe 2 inches. So that's going to go in here. And what we're going to do with all these spices is about 1 tablespoon of each of all the essential ones. And the rest is just a pinch of cardamom, a pinch of cloves, 1 bay leaf, about 2 inches of the cinnamon, and then half a teaspoon of the fenugreek, and everything else is about 1 tablespoon. And then we're going to use 3 cubes of butter because the recipe listed is only for 1, but what I do when I make these bricks is I always want to have 3 or 4 because I put it in the fridge and I keep it in the freezer so that whenever I need it, I just pop it out, see? And since they keep for like 6 months, why not make a bunch? But if you only want to make 1, that's okay. Just use a third of the curry powder that we're making and just 1 stick. But I'll just show you how easy it is to make 3 sticks. Okay, here we go. All right, so here's you need a coffee grinder. If you don't have one, you could have, if you have one of these stone grinders, that's okay too. But a coffee grinder works really well. And we're going to, so I pre-measured everything. So we're just going to put all the whole spices in here. So it looks like a lot of spices because we're making 3 bricks. And 1 brick, one of these mini loaf pan will serve 10 to 12 people. So times 3, so that's 36 people that you could feed with 3 bricks. So if you're at home and you don't have a large family, like in my household right now, it's just my husband and myself, so we don't have to make, you know, a curry with a whole brick. We just we just cut it and make a third. You know, just cut the curry brick, or we make it into these small cupcake, and then just drop that in. So this is 1/3 of a curry brick. So you could just shape them in different forms and just make it easy. But you're going to start to learn how to work with it, because these thicken quite fast in the broth or in water. So here I am. What I'm doing is I'm quickly toasting it. And the thing you don't want to do is burn them. So not on high heat. And I was just not paying that much attention. So it got a little bit higher than I like it. But all you need to do is just, when you start smelling it, that's when you want to stop. You don't want it to be smoking, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to grind it. And I didn't. So what we do is it's very convenient if you have one of these guys, these jam makers. You see it? I don't know if you can see it, but here we go. And then, okay, here we go. You shake it a few times, and that helps. If you want it to become a powder. So here we go. See, it's turned into powder. It's still hot, so it's smoking a little bit. Okay, so now we're done. And what you do is you take a strainer like this, and we will. Sorry. Nothing broke, sorry. I can't reach the other side right now. That's why I have to let it go. Okay, so here we are. Don't put your finger into the grinder. I see my students do that, and it just freaks me out when they do that, especially when the cord is on. So please, plugged in. Please be very careful. This is not. Don't let your kids do this. Okay. All right. So here we are, and then I'm going to. And you know, if you don't like it, this one came out a little bit coarse. So what you could do is you could put it to the grinder again, if you like. Okay, so I'm going to put it to the grinder again, but it's pretty. This part is still on the coarse side, so I'm going to put it back. And so you do it one more time. In fact, I'm going to do it one more time. Okay. I suggest that if you're going to get into curry making, or if you're going to be working with spices like this, get a dedicated grinder, because you'll have people in your family complaining, like my husband. He says, "Why does my coffee taste like turmeric?" So if you want to avoid that conversation, do that. Okay, so here are the grind spices. Let's do that. A lot of curry. Okay. And then we have the turmeric. It's already powder form. Here is, oh, I forgot to tell you, I have a little bit of paprika. That's optional. And the cayenne. I have about a teaspoon of cayenne, which is a very mild curry. If you want it spicier, put 1.5 to 2 teaspoons. And this is ginger. So ginger is essential, I think. Okay, so now you have this ginger powder, which this will make 3 mini loaves of mini bricks. So we're going to use all of it. But if you're not planning to use, you're only planning to make 1 brick, just use 1/3 of it, okay? So this, you could put it in a like a mason jar and just keep it in a dark place. But see, you have your own original curry powder, and I'm going to add some salt to it. And you could taste it at this point and see if it's salty enough for you, but this makes a really nice sprinkle like on roasted vegetables also, so you don't have to necessarily just use it for your Japanese curry. Okay, so now, okay, so this is melted butter. So I have 3 sticks of melted butter here, and what we're gonna do, now if you do not want to use butter, you could use coconut oil. And the measurement is exactly the same. Just use it in solid form, not liquid form. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a roux. And a roux is made by combining flour and fat. And so there's 3 cubes and 2 cups. So if you were just making 1, you could you just add about 2/3 cup. And if you went a little bit over, you could go as high as 1 cup, because a lot of the roux is made with equal parts flour and water. But I use about 2/3. And if you have a sifter, it's better to sift it this way. It aerates it and makes the flour finer. Okay. Now we just cook it. And I don't know if you've made roux before, but if you've made gravy, gravy is also fat and flour. And if you let it cook for a few minutes, that's white gravy. If you let it cook for longer, it becomes like a light brown gravy and a dark gravy if you let it go longer. We don't want to, I usually say about 15 minutes, but you don't have to cook it that long because we'll be cooking it in the curry broth. But I like to get that rawness of the flour out. That's what it might, and also kind of cook it so that it's more digestible. But again, I said it's going to be cooking in the broth, so you don't have to worry too much about digestibility. And if you have issues with gluten, I use buckwheat flour, millet flour. Millet has a very specific taste, but millet is nice. I also like rice flour instead of all-purpose. You could also use whole wheat flour. And here I am, and try not to burn it, please. But you can make it into a light brown color. So this is, if you can't see it, I'm just going to show it to you. How it's combined and see? All right. So. Okay. So while this is cooking, I'm going to get this ready. Because once you add the spices, you don't have to cook the spices. So see how fast it goes? Get rid of things we don't want. Let me see if I can find a nice spatula. Oh, you know what I forgot? Ooh, I forgot the cinnamon. Sorry. I forgot. So if you forget the cinnamon, you could crush it and add it later. But since we've been cooking it for so long, I don't know, but let's see. You could also just add a little bit of cinnamon powder. Oops, sorry. I feel like a klutz a little bit. Okay, so here it is. And just so that I promise you all these ingredients, I'm just gonna sift it in here. This for the final touch. Okay. All right, so now I could say that I put everything in. And now we put the rest of our spices. Okay. All right, so here comes, so assume that I was cooking this for about 15 minutes on low heat, but it could go a little faster. You could even stop at 10 minutes. And now you start adding the spices. And you have to turn off your heat and go fast. And you have to stir it while the fat is still hot. Otherwise it's going to start to become solid in the pot, and you don't want that. You don't want it to harden too fast because you still have to pour it into the mold. So, but basically this is done. And give it a good mix. And I'm just going to show you the paste. See, can you see this? Okay, so then what we do is we're going to scoop it. Just divide it into 3. 1. So I said each block will make about 10 to 12 servings of curry. And I have you could use a spoon, kind of spread it out so it's even. Okay. Okay. So then, if you have a spatula like this, you just kind of, I found this one was a gift from a friend of mine. She found it in a thrift store. So look, it has a little angle, so it helps me flatten it out. Now, if you do not have a mini loaf, you could pour this whole thing on a sheet pan and then cut it into 3 bricks. Or if you plan to do only 4 servings at a time, then you cut it into 9 bricks, 9 little bricks, and then just wrap each one in foil or in plastic wrap, or you could just keep them in a glass container with a lid on it. But see, here we go. So this is basically your curry brick. And what I want to show you, so this is when I flip them over, it looks like this, but this needs to go into the fridge and harden. You could also stick it directly in the freezer. What you could do is just, it's very hot, so be careful. See, so I put it on a tray, and then I take it to my fridge. And I want to show you one that I made earlier. This one is made in a silicone baking sheet. So this goes into the fridge. Okay, so what I did with this one is, this one gives me nine molds. So they're super mini cake molds. And what you do is you just, this has been in the freezer for a while. So when it comes out of the freezer, they don't look so good. They look like, uh, they look slightly moldy, but don't worry about it. When it melts, you get this coloring, okay? See, right now it's white because it is cold, but we'll just leave it in here and you'll see that the color will change eventually. So, so you could try different molds. I've had people do chocolate molds and make presents. Okay, so let's see. So up to this point, we've made, this is the curry brick part, and I'm also going to show you how to make a quick curry. And show you how easy it could be. I'm using this donabe, which is a Japanese clay pot. They're beautiful. And okay, just wanted to. So here's a little bit of Japanese sesame oil. You could use regular olive oil. And then we could heat up. Now, for the curry, I use different kinds of broth, but I find that the easiest broth to have is kombu and shiitake mushrooms. And what I do is I just do an overnight soak. So here it is, my instant curry broth. And you could, if you don't have time for that, you could just do water. And you could cut up this mushroom and put it in your curry if you like. So it gives a really nice umami. Dry shiitake and kombu are one of the two, there's three essential ones, but these are one of the two ingredients that we use for making stock. And in my cookbook, I spend a whole chapter talking about stock. Because Japanese cooking is all about dashi, which is stock. But you're welcome to use chicken broth. Chicken broth is wonderful. And what I did is I sauteed some chicken a little bit ahead of time so we don't wait. We're going to put that in there. Okay. This chicken is almost cooked. So I'll speed up the process. And then vegetable-wise, I said to you earlier that you could use all kinds of vegetables, and what I found in my fridge was carrots, cauliflower, green pepper, red pepper, celery, and potatoes. So if you find an eggplant that's waiting to be used, you could throw an eggplant in here too, but make sure you do, onions are great. I always put a whole onion in for 4 servings. So what I'm making right now is just, I'm just using 1/3 of the brick, or these came out kind of small, but one brick is about, about 7 ounces, 7 to 8 ounces. So 1/3 is about 2.5 ounces. And then you could add the vegetables. Can you see? Okay. So, so it's been about 30 minutes since we started this program, and this curry is going to start cooking. The sauteing strengthens the surface of the vegetables and retains the flavor, so it's good to do a little bit. I like to add a little garlic, and I like to add more ginger. Even though it's in the curry, I just like to add fresh ginger. And then Here goes mine. So you could use between 4 and 7 cups, 4 to 6 cups. If you're in a hurry, the more liquid it has, the more time it's going to take. But you need to use at least 4 cups of liquid for allowing at least 1 cup of curry for each serving. But I usually do about 6 cups of broth. And bring this to a boil and then let it cook for about 10-15 minutes, and then you add the curry. And let's say that you are really in a hurry and you want curry. You could use the curry bricks that are still soft. They don't need to be hardened. Just use it like a paste and drop it into your. So here we are. We are now letting it come to a boil, and I could start taking questions from you. I'm also going to show you how I store these. So I found these. When I do my curry brick classes, which is really has become one of my most popular cooking classes, I have these chocolate wrappers, and I wrap these like this. This one is kind of a big one, but if it's too big, you could always use 2. But this is like, you know, a chocolate, right? So you could. I'm not doing a really good job today, but. So I just wrap it like chocolate, and then I would just keep these like this in the fridge. And when I give it to people as a gift, they love these wrappers. So you just wrap it any way you like, and see, it's pure gold. So before we drop in the curry bricks, I'll start taking some questions.
Excellent. This is fantastic, and I'm getting hungry. All right, so I'm going to work a little bit. I'm going to sort of work backwards on the questions so we can start with the pot you're currently in. Somebody is asking what you added before the extra ginger. So you've added a lot of things. I imagine it's kind of hard to remember the order in which you did. Maybe you can just let us know.
So I started by sauteing some onions. And then I sauteed the chicken. I sauteed it only until the chicken was white, but just to give it some color. And then I added sliced potato. I had 1 whole celery. I had half of a pepper and a whole carrot and some cauliflower. So that's what went in, and then I put the ginger, the chopped ginger, and about a tablespoon and 2 cloves of the garlic.
Perfect.
And then I'm going to let it, cook for a little while before I add the curry brick.
Excellent. And the sesame oil you use, do you use toasted or is it raw pressed, or what is your preference on sesame oil?
I like it untoasted.
Untoasted. Raw. Excellent. And
then I just recently found out it's a beautiful organic oil from Japan, and a company called Japanese Pantry based in San Francisco carries these. It's a really nice one.
Excellent. And can you tell us when the cinnamon is added? And did you grind that too?
I just forgot to put it in the grinder. But the cinnamon is added when you're grinding the spices in the coffee grinder. You put it in there and grind it together.
Perfect.
Now, cinnamon is very strong. And growing up in Japan, I didn't grow up with cinnamon. So when I first tasted a homemade curry by my father's co-workers that he made from scratch, I tasted the cinnamon and I thought, this is so weird. And I didn't like it back then. But I've acquired a taste for it in cooking and savory foods. And so you just need to decide if this is something you like. Some of the spices may not all agree with you. Like some people say, I've had students say, I need to put more cumin in it. And I only had a limited amount of cumin, and the student was eager enough to rush out to a grocery store around the corner to get more cumin. So, and these chili peppers are always in demand, and you could buy the cayenne or you could buy these whole and grind them and just chop it into your your curry. But yeah, did I answer your question?
Yes, totally. And that's a good segue into another question, which is you mentioned that some of those spices you added are optional. Can you tell us which ones you feel are not optional?
That's something I covered in the very beginning of the class. I feel that cumin, for me, cumin, ginger, turmeric, cayenne, um, cardamom, black pepper, and mustard, black mustard seeds. I think these are essential
Okay.
for me. But see, the way I came up with all these ingredients is people kept saying, well, how do you get to that industrial curry flavor? And I was like, okay, what are these companies using to come up with this brand in Japan that has been around for over 100 years? There's one called S&B, and it has more than 12 spices in it. So that was my starting point. And I came across all these spices I never used before, like fenugreek. But again, if you Google basic curry powder, you will see that fenugreek is not that common. And you could, some people will use nutmeg or anise star. I think you need to kind of make one basic one and then play around with it. And yes, spices could get very expensive. If you buy 12, you might end up spending like $100. You may not want to do that. So you could take out a few. I think clove is also optional. That's very strong. But, you know, when I visited a family in Bangalore last year, the lady, the mother was only using like four spices. And it was a curry leaf and some cardamom, a little bit of cinnamon stick and turmeric. And I think, and there was cumin also, but not 12 spices. So you're gonna play with these spices and eventually come up with your own, I think. So it's you'll have to experiment and see what you like. So what I also like to do is add a little bit of citrus. So or you could do lemon, but you could just for some brightness, you could. Oh, what happened to mine? I had an orange, but I think the orange fell on the other side, so I can't reach. But you could, if you like a little bit of lemon or something, a brightener, you could add that to the curry. If you like more umami, remember that the soaking one, you could use the soaking one and just stick it in there, or you could just add a piece of kombu in there. That always improves. That's more stock. You could take the soaking also, this if I could reach. You could take these mushrooms, chop it up and put it in the curry. That's also really nice. You don't want to waste these mushrooms. They're so good. So I will add that to the curry. But you know, if you only have carrots and potato and onion, those three are the three most common ingredients in a Japanese curry. So you don't have to go out and put all these ingredients in. All right. So now that this has been cooking, do you have another question before I put the curry?
I have one question, sort of a clarifier from a couple of people. Do you use 1 stick of butter and 2/3 cups of flour for one brick? And you tripled the recipe today.
Yes, I did.
Okay, perfect. A couple people are asking. So that's 1 stick of butter. Like the recipe we sent you, the ingredient list we sent you is for 1 brick.
Okay,
so
yeah, but don't use all the powder, because the powder, you just make enough so that you have it in stock, because it's just hard to do little. So I just make enough for 3 bricks and I just keep it in a jar. So when you add the powder that you've made, only add 1/3 of it.
Perfect. Okay. And how long do the bricks keep in the fridge versus the freezer? And which one do you prefer?
You know, I make so many that the freezer is already kind of full with not only bricks but also flour. Freezer lasts longer. I've had it for 6 months, no problem. And in the fridge also. But I think, as you know, fresh is the best. Like if you just make the brick and use it that same day, it's very fragrant, right? So if you're really caring about aroma instead of convenience, I would use it, right away. But it's amazing how well it holds. So give it a good wrap, and put it in a Ziploc bag or wrap it in foil. Um, so these are the two little ones that weigh about a little less than 2 ounces. So I'm adding it to the 5 cups of broth in here. It's cooked down a little bit. So what you need to do is you cook it for about 15-20 minutes and see how much it has thickened. And if it hasn't thickened, you need to cook it longer. And if you don't want to overcook your vegetables, reduce the amount of broth. You could always add the broth later, or you could add more curry bricks. See how quickly it just turns into this. And also, if you are using a gluten-free flour, it's going to be soupy because there's no gluten in it. So what you do is you add a thickener, like a starch. I would add, in the final cooking process, 1 tablespoon of like a tapioca, potato starch or cornstarch diluted with water and add it into the broth. But if you have potatoes in it, it will thicken. Another thing I like to do is, because I told you this curry is not salty, I make a curry brick that is mild so that people who have salt issues don't have to worry about the saltiness of this brick. I add some salt. This is the final flavoring for me because I could use salt. I put soy sauce. That's in the recipe, by the way. A couple tablespoons of soy sauce because it's really not salty. And lately, what I like to do is do a splash of vinegar, rice vinegar.
And then you mentioned that if you want it to be saltier than the amount of salt you put into the brick, you would add your salt to your curry or whatever the dish you're preparing is.
Or you can add it to the brick.
Okay, or you can up the salt if you like.
I think there's only 1 tablespoon of salt in the brick recipe. Mm-hmm. It's not salty at all, but it acts also as a preservative. I would do like 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of salt for 3 bricks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So the powder would have the powder will have salt in it, so it's going to be a salty curry powder.
Cool. Great.
So this one's already becoming curry. See, it's already nice and starting to get curry-like. So the way I like to serve curry is with rice. You could also serve it with bread, or you don't have to serve it with anything. You just eat it. So I think I have some rice ready. So let me give this. And I always like to serve pickles with it. So pickles. So I just cut some cucumber, and you could just cut the cucumbers. I had some parsley, so you could just rub it. If you don't have any fermented pickles, you could just make a little salad, and you could squeeze some lemon. All right, and let's see. I made some rice. This is short grain rice. It's Coda Farm short grain rice. What you do, since this one is still cooking, I'm going to move this one. Let's see. Yeah, this one needs another 15 minutes, so I'm just going to move this. Remember, this one I made earlier. So you just reheat it. I could cook a little bit more, but I'm just gonna. And then you serve the curry. Oh yeah. Let me just cut some lemon. Lemon to the pickle. Yeah, you want some acidity for contrast. And then some rice. It's still hot, so I just cooked it. Any questions? Any other questions?
Yes. One question we have is, do we want to let the curry brick sit at room temperature for a few hours before we put it into the fridge or the freezer?
You could put it right into the freezer.
Okay.
As long as you don't have other things. I usually clear out my freezer. When I do a class, my freezer is completely, my bottom freezer is clear, and I make room for the curry bricks. Be very careful because it's hot. I don't want you to burn yourself.
One more question is, how about using fresh ingredients like ginger, and if you can get your hands on some turmeric or garlic or lemongrass in the curry brick? Can we substitute some of those dry ingredients for fresh, or is it better to stick with the dry ingredients?
The whole purpose is that if you don't have time, it's a convenient brick. So, I mean, if you could go and find turmeric root, and I've actually never really cooked with fresh turmeric brick, so I'm not the right person to guide you. But ginger is okay. You could just grate the ginger and use it. So if you don't have ginger powder, I would just use fresh ginger. That's fine. You know, I come from a ginger culture. We don't use that many spices in Japanese culture, except for this curry that was imported from India via England. That's why we use this roux. In India, you don't find curries made with roux. But the whole appreciation for all these spices happened only a few hundred years ago, you know, like a little bit over 100 years ago. And we're still learning about spices. So I can't give you all the good advice, but definitely ginger. And lemongrass, I think, for sure, yeah.
Excellent. One more question is, can you tell us about the pot you're using? And if we don't have that, what another kind of pot we could use is?
Well, you know, I was using the Le Creuset, any pot, all clad, you know, whatever you have in your kitchen. I'm just doing this because I like my donut. You know, this is a clay pot that is pretty. So it doesn't have to be this at all. It's just showcasing this beautiful donabe.
It is beautiful. So you said that's called a donabe pot, and is the other one you were using also a donabe pot of a different size?
Yeah, there's just different variations. So here is the curry, and you could serve it with a little bit of, you see this?
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's beautiful.
And here's another one. Although my husband's not here, so I guess I'm just gonna have to eat two servings.
I'll take one.
Yeah, always see what, I mean, Japanese, I do spend a lot of time talking about color, but you want to think about color balance, and not just 5 colors, but also what kind of vegetables you have. This is a really good way to get your kids to eat vegetables. Curry is one dish that children really love in Japan, and I highly recommend it. So here is the curry, cooking away, and the more you cook it, the thicker it becomes. If you let it sit overnight, it's going to get thicker. And if you think it's too thick, just add a little bit of broth.
If we were going to let it sit overnight, would you put it in the fridge or keep it on the counter?
Either way.
Okay.
Yeah. If it's hot outside, I would
sure.
I would put it in the fridge. Yeah.
Sure. Perfect. All right. Let me take a quick look at these questions to see if I missed anything. Do you have a favorite flour that you like to use for the roux?
I'd like to use the Sonora flour. It's a heritage grain, and it's low protein. It works like it works in it's like a cake flour, but you could use all-purpose. You could also use whole wheat, and try different ones. I think the heritage grains will add more flavor to it. So when you're making the roux, it's not white. It's brown from the beginning, or caramel color from the beginning. So be careful, because you think it's done, but maybe you need to cook it more because it's still raw. So, but yeah, Sonora is one of my favorites for curry.
Great. Excellent. Let's see. And you said we can keep those curry bricks in a glass container, or really any kind of container works. Foil. You mentioned the chocolate wrappers as a nice thing to give as a gift or make them look pretty.
Yeah,
they could be wrapped in essentially anything. Is that correct?
definitely anything. Yeah. What is it? Wax paper.
Ah, cool.
Yeah, but they do melt, so you don't forget to keep. If you give it to somebody, you tell them it has to go in the fridge.
Perfect.
And
Okay.
I was going to say, if anybody is overwhelmed by all the spices you have to get, I also did a spice kit. So if you go to my website, you could get the spice kit, and it makes 3 bricks. So it's like really simple uh, kit that I made for my students, and it's quite popular.
Cool. Great. That's perfect. We'll include a link to that spice mix in a follow-up email to all these folks.
Thank you so
And,
much. I really
and for,
appreciate you this hour with me to make curry, and I hope you try it. And if you succeed, let me know. Take a picture and let me know.
yeah, when you're making your curry out there, if you share it on social media, tag Sonoko and Slow Food USA so we can see it and share it
Yeah,
and see how everything went. Tell us how it
all
tasted.
kinds of curries from all over the United States, and you said people are from overseas are watching too.
Yes, definitely. It was
Yeah.
and I love that I'm just digging into your book and that you grew up in a few different places with pretty different food cultures, and I love how your influences, it seems, have made their way into your recipes with
Yeah.
the chili peppers or different kinds of flour and that sort of thing, and you're
You know,
encouraging folks to
cumin is
explore.
Mexican, my Mexican upbringing, right? So
Yeah. It's like
yeah,
my husband. He just is a cumin in everything. It doesn't matter what it is. So
yeah,
sometimes we have favorite spices, and I want to reiterate your encouragement to explore. Maybe start with the recipe and then see what you like and
yeah.
keep
And if you
trying.
miss you, it's okay. You know, it's like there's always salt and pepper, and that's going to enhance it. So I wouldn't worry too much about trying to get everything.
Great. Okay, well, I'll let you say a final goodbye, but before I do, thank you to everyone for being here. We'll follow up with an email to the recorded session, so if you're not making it right now, you can refer back when you are, and we'll list those ingredients one more time and send a link to the recipe published on the New York Times so that you can reference the recipe, and also a link to Sonoko's book and her spice mix. One note is that Roost Books is offering all of you 20% off on their whole shop with the code SLOWFOOD. That's all one word. So you can go grab Sonoko's book there for 20% off and free shipping. And there's a few others. We have a Roost author joining us each Wednesday this month. So check out their collection. And I am really excited about having this book in my kitchen, and I encourage you to do the same. It's
Yeah, and
beautiful.
there's all these other recipes too. I and a lot of good stories too that collected over 30 years. So I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, just give me a drop me an email or Instagram me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sonoko. We'll share your Instagram handle so people can share their curry bricks with you.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, and stay warm. I heard you had a snowstorm, so
Yeah, the weather has been odd. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll follow up soon. And thank you so much, Sonoko, for your time. It's really wonderful and helpful to see you cook through it. I think that's helpful for all of us. So we appreciate you and your wonderful cooking. Thanks for being with us today.
thank you.